Russia. So far, Russia gives no sign that trilateral will happen, and if Russia refuses, then new sanctions must follow. Third, it's important that America agrees to work with Europe to provide security guarantees for Ukraine, and we are very thankful to the United States and to the President for such signal.
Ukrainian President Zelensky yesterday holding a news conference with the European Commission President. Brad Bowman here is with us this afternoon to give us his insight and analysis ahead of Mr. Zelensky's arrival at the White House. We are just a minute away here, Brad Bowman. What do you make of his statement there yesterday at that news conference?
A lot of important content there. So what did he say very quickly? He said, we got to stop the killing. That's what President Trump has said. He wants to stop the killing. So that first thing he said there was directly aligned with what has been the top priority for President Trump. He noted that Putin has many demands. That is accurate. Putin has many demands. Putin is trying, as I keep saying, trying to lock in what he's stolen from Ukraine and see if he can get more at the diplomatic table than he's been able to accomplish on the battlefield. And Zelensky highlighted that the Russians, he said, for 12 years, now he's going back, obviously, to Crimea and what happened and what started in the Donbass after that, has been unable to take all of the Donetsk Oblast. And so Putin is trying to get that at the diplomatic table, that which they've been unable to achieve on the battlefield, and Zelensky highlighted that. He also called for essentially a full unconditional ceasefire. That, I believe, is consistent with American national security interests and what I said it should have been the goal in Alaska. And, and President Trump himself said going there that he was going to judge the success of Alaska based on whether we could get some sort of ceasefire. And we haven't gotten that yet. So I think Zelensky was right to reiterate that. He also talked about the Ukrainian constitution. Your viewers should understand he can't just walk in there and say, okay, sounds good. Let's give the Russians, these 4 oblasts and Crimea. No, because they're a democracy. Yes, an imperfect democracy, but a democracy. And they have a constitution, just like we have a constitution. There's a little different. Describes in their constitution what is part of Ukraine, down to each region area. And that same constitution says that cannot be changed without a full vote of the Ukrainian people, sounding like a democracy, right? So he's going to have whatever agreement is reached to abide by their constitution as a democratic leader, as opposed to an autocrat and authoritarian. He's going to need to take that back and get the support of the Ukrainian people. And then there at the end, he was reiterated 2 last points: the value of the trilateral arrangement. What I see my previous comments about Ukraine should always be at the table when the topic is Ukraine. Imagine that. And he also talked about the need for consequences. And that is my primary respectful criticism of the Trump administration. It's not a partisan criticism. It's not a petty or criticism. It's just, I want the best for our interests and I want the best for Ukraine. And I worry that the warning of consequences that are not implemented or delayed forever simply makes us weak and undermines President Trump's negotiating position.
Well, as you said, and as the reports are today, if today goes well, the White House is hoping for that trilateral meeting where it's President Trump along with Russian President Putin and the Ukrainian President, Mr. Zelensky, all standing together. Can you imagine that, Brad Bowman?
That would be quite an image, right? I got to be honest with you that the images from Alaska were kind of jarring for me. Vladimir Putin, given what he has done here, the roughly 1.5 million casualties on the Russian-Ukrainian sides as a result of this self-aggrandizing war of conquest, the war crimes and crimes against humanity in Bucha, the abduction of thousands of Ukrainian children, the destruction, according to a UN entity, of at least 150 churches, and by some counts, more than 600 churches in Ukraine. He's presenting himself as the defender of Orthodox Christianity and tradition while he's blowing up churches all around Ukraine. It was a little hard for me to stomach to see him walking on the red carpet and a handshake, treating him like, this is just another leader visiting. I can only imagine how Ukrainians must have felt looking at that, given what they've been going through at his hands. But when in international diplomacy, when you're a leader of a nation state, sometimes you have to meet with some unsavory foreign leaders to do what's necessary for our country and its interests. So it certainly would be a remarkable image to see those 3 individuals standing side by side. But most wars end with some sort of diplomacy, and when you can't resolve it on the battlefield, you got to go back to the diplomatic table. How you go to the diplomatic table matters. The shadow of power cast over that diplomatic table, as I keep saying, matters. Russia understands that. That's why they're continuing their attacks. Yet we have consequences that we're reluctant to impose. So they kind of get that. And sometimes I worry that we don't. But no doubt, it would be a remarkable development, a historic development to have that trilateral meeting. And my hope is that what we have here today is a unified message of strength that empowers President Trump and helps Ukraine, because that's in our national security interest, and that the next step is a trilateral meeting where President Trump is not portraying himself as like a neutral negotiator, but as someone who is on the side of Ukraine, the invaded, against Russia, the invader, and makes clear that we will only support a plan that is supported by Ukraine, and that American power and prestige will stand behind it, with our European allies right at our side, carrying most of the burden and an increasing portion of the burden over time. That's what I would hope for.
As we wait for the Ukrainian president, what is it that Ukraine would like for them to come to the table? And any sort of peace deal, what does it need to look like for Ukraine?
Yeah, well, Ukraine obviously would like the invaders to go home, stop killing Ukrainians and leave. But that's not going to happen, because we know Vladimir Putin, the guy that invaded Georgia in 2008 and Crimea in 2014 and started all the Donbass in 2014, and then did what he did in 2022 and continues to attack Ukrainians right now, attack and kill Ukrainians in their homes right now as we speak. That's what Ukrainians want, but they're not going to get it from Vladimir Putin, because he's trying to reconstitute as much of the Soviet Union as he can, and so here we are. It's just a reminder, right? You know, I'm all for diplomacy and development matter. I'm a big proponent of a well-resourced and empowered Department of State and development. But in the end, you know, when things are not resolved with soft power, history tells us that hard power is preeminent. And that's what we're seeing on full display, that really underscores the importance of the United States to maintain its military power, because in the end, what is said and what is written will only hold if predators like Putin believe that there's hard power backing it up. That's what history tells us. That's what a objective reading of Vladimir Putin's history and his more than 15 years in the KGB tells us. So Ukraine wants the invaders to leave and go home and stop killing innocent men, women, and children. That's not going to happen. So what we're engaged in here today at the White House, what we're seeing these leaders engaging in, is what can we accomplish that protects our transatlantic and our individual national interests, that is actually achievable. That's the essential question. And anyone who's kind of sit on the sideline and has got easy solutions and is quick to criticize, you don't understand how hard this is. This is incredibly difficult.
Brad Bowman, I want to share with our viewers and you this video just posted on X by Mr. Zelensky. He was at the Ukrainian embassy here in Washington, D.C. 30 minutes ago, greeting the European leaders over at that embassy. Get a sneak peek at his attire, which is being reported on today. You can see he's wearing the black jacket ahead of today's meeting with the president and the European leaders, all of them gathering first at the Ukrainian embassy here in the United States. Brad Bowman, your thoughts?
Yeah, you know, I focus on foreign policy and national security, so I'll leave the fashion criticisms to others. But looks like a perfectly fine outfit to me. And more important than that, I see a show of unity here, a show of unity. And this should not, President Trump should not view this as a threat. He should view this as our allies come into town, united with us to pursue our combined transatlantic interest. He should view this as empowering him, making and supporting his peace through strength policy. These allies are our friends. They've stood by us, many of them for decades or centuries, and they're coming to talk with President Trump in respect, with common interest, eyeing a common adversary who's engaged in the worst war in Europe since World War II. So this is an opportunity for unity and strength that reinforces President Trump's peace through strength policy. I hope he views it that way, because that's what's the opportunity here. Vladimir Putin hopes that he sees that as a threat. He hopes that he sees that as something negative, which it is not, so that he can divide us and weaken us so that we're more susceptible to his predation.
All right, we'll go to Chris, who's been waiting in Boston, Democratic caller. Chris, we are waiting for the Ukrainian president to arrive. What are your thoughts ahead of this meeting?
Yeah, hello. Yeah, my viewpoint is that the original sin was committed by the United States when, in 1990, then Secretary of State James Baker promised Gorbachev that in exchange for the reunification of Germany, NATO would not extend 1 inch eastward. That was the original sin. And it's no wonder that Putin's throwing a hissy fit, because the Russians kept their part of the bargain. But as soon as the Warsaw Pact collapsed, the United States actively recruited every one of those countries until the United States and NATO was up on the Russian border. There is a if you
Chris,
Google,
I'm gonna have our guest Brad Bowman jump in on your thoughts there.
Yeah, no, thanks for the call, sir. I appreciate it. This is a point that comes up regularly, that has been regularly debunked. There were informal discussions, but there was no formal, official U.S. government codified commitment to not expand NATO. And is, in fact, on the contrary, it's been NATO's open door has been an explicit policy. And let's think about that. What is that explicit policy? Is that any member, any country in the region can apply to join NATO based on their desire to join and the desire of their democratic elected leaders. And so I guess, sir, what you're implicitly supporting there is that Vladimir Putin should have a veto over what the foreign policy of other countries. So you're arguing for a might makes right sphere of influence where Vladimir Putin should have called the shots for Eastern European countries. I don't agree with that. I think each nation state should be able to make its own decision and decide how it wants to conduct its foreign policy and whether it wants to apply to join the alliance. And that's exactly what they did. And why did they do that, sir? It's not because they wanted to have someone cool to toast at cocktail parties. It's because they viewed Russia as a threat and they wanted to join the alliance to defend themselves and increase the capability of their militaries, not for the purpose of attacking Russia, but to defend themselves. And, you know, the only time that NATO has declared Article 5 was after the United States was attacked on 9/11. And let me remind Americans, that's the only time. And more than 1,000 of our allies paid the ultimate sacrifice in Afghanistan. We were attacked. They weren't attacked, but they stepped up to the plate. They invoked Article 5, and some of them stuck with us for the full 20 years down to the last days, and more than 1,000 of them didn't return home. So I stand by what I said. NATO is a defensive alliance. Read it. It's defensive explicitly. It is obviously not a threat to an offensive invasion to Russia. Vladimir Putin knows it. That's why he left his borders next to the Baltic member countries so relatively unguarded for so long. If he believed his own talking points, he would have militarized his border near the Baltics to a much more significant degree. And for many, many years, he didn't. So he doesn't believe his own talking points. Vladimir Putin resents NATO enlargement because it makes it harder for him to bully, coerce, invade, control that country. Because if he picks a fight with that country, he's picked a fight with the United States.
All right.
Yeah, it's as simple as that.
Flags are hoisted at the White House. And then that's a good indication here that we could see Mr. Zelensky's car arriving any moment here at the White House. And now he is arriving at the west wing of the compound here at the White House in Washington. And it means that he'll just have to be able to walk almost directly right into the West Wing when he arrives here at the White House. That differs from the arrival of the European leaders. They were over at the North Portico, and that's a typical arrival spot for our allies when they come to the United States to visit with the president. You saw the red carpet rolled out for those European leaders, the chief of protocol greeting them and bringing them into the White House. Here you have a different scene. The Ukrainian president will arrive, and we don't know who will greet him. We'll see if it's President Trump. And the two leaders then are expected to go right into the Oval Office, where they will meet first, the two leaders. And then there will be a family photo with the European leaders and President Trump. And then All three parties will gather together in the East Room for a multilateral meeting at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. We expect that reporters will be allowed in for that at the top of that 3 p.m. meeting. There's the car carrying the Ukrainian leader. Let's listen and watch. Ukrainian President Zelensky has arrived at the White House. You can see, greeted by President Trump. The two gentlemen are just steps away from the Oval Office, arriving at the West Wing of the White House, and then they will go into the Oval Office for a meeting first. The two of them just face to face right after President Trump has met with the Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska on Friday. Here we are on Monday, August 18th. 3 days later, and the two gentlemen are meeting for this historic meeting today here in Washington. Also joining in is the 7 European leaders. They have already arrived at the White House, and they're in a holding pattern here while Mr. Zelensky and Mr. Trump meet. And then all three parties will gather together later this afternoon for a multilateral meeting, all to discuss a potential end to the Russia-Ukraine war. The 7 European leaders at the White House right now are the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, the French President Emmanuel Macron, the Italian Prime Minister, the German Chancellor is there. You also have the Finnish President and the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and the NATO Secretary General. They arrived at the White House earlier this afternoon. You heard the president answer a question from reporters when asked about those European leaders. He said, "We love them." You saw a handshake between Mr. Trump and Mr. Zelensky and a pat on the back as well. Brad Bowman, what do you make of the president greeting Mr. Zelensky? He did not greet the European leaders. It was the chief of protocol.
You know, I think it's what one might expect, and it was incredibly positive. I give President Trump credit for doing that. That kind of symbolism matters. It seemed like a cordial greeting. He motioned at him in some way. It'd be interesting to know what he said when he motioned to him. And then he, as you said, he got a couple of questions from reporters. One of the questions I heard was about continued Russian attacks and Ukrainian casualties. And I think that was a good question from the reporter. But it was amicable, and they went in. And bottom line is we're witnessing history here. This is, for good or ill, a historic moment. And whether it is for good or ill will be determined in what follows, what is said and what follows in terms of tangible action. But I think the consequences of what is decided here today in the next few days and weeks will reverberate around the world for a long time to come. So this is historic and important. And so far, so good. Now let's see what follows.
Well, let's pick up on continued attacks, because Mr. Zelensky, of course, was talking about that ahead of today's meeting, pointing to that as proof that Russia's not interested in any sort of peace deal. What has been happening since Friday in Ukraine?
Right. Yeah. So we have, I made the comment on Friday in Washington Journal that attacks were continuing right up to that meeting, and they've continued since then. We've, we had at least, according to CNN, you had at least 10 killed in attacks in Ukrainian cities, in Zaporizhia, and an attack in Kharkiv city. That's that city which was right near where that funeral was that I talked about in the Washington Journal. You've had overnight drone attacks. According to CNN, over 140 of those Shahed drones. Shahed drones, those are the Iranian drones that Iran provided to Russia to support its invasion of Ukraine. The very same drones that Iran has used to attack U.S. troops and to attack Israel. And so, and Iran has helped Russia build a factory for those very same drones. So the bottom line is that we see the attacks continuing, Ukrainians continue to die, And what Putin is doing is very clear.
All right,
He's
Brad
trying-
Bowman, I'm going to jump in. The pool is gathered just right outside the Oval. They're now going in. It's a scrum as they get established inside the room. You can see they need to get their microphones set, their cameras set. Let's listen in.
Between us.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor to have the President of Ukraine with us. We've had a lot of good discussions, a lot of good talks, and I think progress is being made, very, very substantial progress in many ways. We had a good meeting, as you know, just a short while ago with the President of Russia. And I think there's a possibility that something could come out of it. And today's meeting is very important. We have, I guess, the seven very powerful leaders from Europe. And we're going to be meeting with them right after this meeting. And thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. If I can, first of all, thank you for invitation and thank you very much for your efforts, personal efforts to stop killings and stop this war. Thank you. And using this opportunity, many thanks to your wife, First Lady of the United States. She sent a letter to Putin about our children, abducted children, and my wife, she, First Lady of Ukraine, she gave the letter. It's not to you, to your wife.
Oh, I want it.
Yeah. So we are saying this sensitive topic, yes, please. And thanks to our partners and that you supported this format that after our meeting we can have leaders who are around us, UK, France, Germany, Italy, Finland, EU, NATO, I mean all partners around Ukraine supporting us. Thanks to them and thank you very much for invitation.
Thank you very much for being here.
President Trump.
Do you think it's fair?
Yes, Peter, go ahead.
Thank you, President Trump. So, President Zelensky, you say in a post on X today, Russia must end this war, which it itself started. President Trump, you say President Zelensky of Ukraine can end the war with Russia almost immediately if he wants to. Which is it?
No, I think that's true. I think we're going to have a meeting. I think if everything works out well today, we'll have a trilat. And I think there will be a reasonable chance of ending the war when we do that.
And is this the end of the road for American support for Ukraine? Is today's meeting deal or no deal?
I can never say that. It's never the end of the road. People are being killed, and we want to stop that. So I would not say it's the end of the road. No, I think we have a good chance of doing it. It's been almost 4 years now that a lot of people were killed last week. A lot of people last week. I mean, millions of people killed, but a lot of people last week for whatever reason. A big number, a lot of soldiers, on both sides. And I know the president, I know myself, and I believe Vladimir Putin wants to see it ended.
And as you met with Putin on Friday, today you've got President Zelensky here. As you listen to Russia and Ukraine, which side has the better cards? Right?
Well, I don't want to say that. I'm just here to be, look, this isn't my war. This is Joe Biden's war. He's the one that had a lot to do with this happening, and we want to get it ended. And we want it to end good for everybody. We want it to end good. The people of Ukraine have suffered incredibly.
And to that point, President Zelensky, are you prepared to keep sending Ukrainian troops to their deaths for another couple years, or are you going to agree to redraw the maps?
Thank you for your question. So, first of all, we live under each day attacks. That today have been a lot of attacks and a lot of wounded people, and the child was dead, small one year and a half. So we need to stop this war, to stop Russia, and we need support American and European partners, and we will do our best for this. So, and I think we show that we are strong people, and we supported the idea of the United States, personally of President Trump, to stop this war, to make a diplomatic way of finishing this war, and we are ready for trilateral, as President said. This is a good signal about trilateral. I think this is very good. Thank you.
Mr. President.
Yes. If the peace deal will be achieved, are you going to be willing to send American peacekeepers to Ukraine?
Well, we're going to work with Ukraine, we're going to work with everybody, and we're going to make sure that if there's peace, the peace is going to stay long-term. This is very long-term. We're not talking about a 2-year peace and then we end up in this mess again. We're going to make sure that everything's good. We'll work with Russia, we're going to work with Ukraine, and we're going to make sure it works. And I think if we can get to peace, it's going to work. I have no doubt about it.
Your team has talked about security guarantees. Could that involve U.S. troops? Would you roll that out in the future?
We'll let you know that maybe later today. We're meeting with 7 great leaders of great countries also, and we'll be talking about that. They'll all be involved, but there'll be a lot of help. When it comes to security, there's going to be a lot of help. It's going to be good. They are first line of defense because they're there. They're Europe. But we're going to help them out also. We'll be involved. Yes.
Vladimir Putin mentioned that the war will not end without addressing the root causes of this war. Have you had an understanding what are the root causes of this war?
Well, look, the war is going to end. When it ends, I can't tell you, but the war is going to end, and this gentleman wants it to end, and Vladimir Putin wants it to end. I think the whole world is tired of it, and we're going to get it ended. It was, you know, I've done 6 wars. I've ended 6 wars, and I thought this maybe would be the easiest one, and it's not the easiest one. It's a tough one. A lot of reasons for it, and they'll be talking about it for a long time. But they'll be talking about the others. Look, India, Pakistan. We're talking about the big places. When you look at, you just take a look at some of these wars. You go to Africa and take a look at that. Rwanda and the Congo, Republic of the Congo. That's been going on for 31 years. And so we've done a total of 6, and we really have 6, not including the fact that we obliterated, and it turned out to be a total obliteration, the nuclear, as you said, the future nuclear capability of Iran. And this one, I think we're going to get solved also. I feel confident we're going to get it solved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Can you tell us about your conversations with European leaders and what they need to see to support an end to the war?
Yeah, well, we're going to be meeting with a great representative group and 7 very powerful, very big countries and great people, all friends of mine and friends of yours. And we're going to have some suggestions made. They want to see peace. They would like to see peace.
President Trump,
In the red.
President Trump, do you think it's fair to, for Ukraine and for Russia to achieve a lasting and durable peace if Ukraine cedes its territories that Russia hasn't yet conquered? Do you think it's a fair peace for Ukraine?
We're going to have a lasting peace. Just to answer the first part of your question, we're going to have a lasting peace. I hope it's going to be immediately. I hope it doesn't have to go on. And I think people of the whole world is going to be very happy when that's announced. Yeah, please.
Mr. President, you posted on social media, Mr. President, a very touching letter from the First Lady. And the letter was hand-delivered to President Putin. And it calls for an end to the war, essentially, because of the children and the children's future. Why did the First Lady feel that letter was necessary? Was it because she believes that Mr. Putin is the aggressor in the war? Is a similar letter being hand-delivered to President Zelensky?
So the First Lady felt very strongly. She's watched the same thing that you watch and that I watch. I see things that you don't get to see, and it's horrible. But when she's got a great love of children, she has a wonderful son that she loves, probably more than anybody, including me. I hate to say it, but she loves her son. She loves children, and she hates to see something like this happening. And that goes for other wars too. I mean, she sees the heartbreak, the parents, the funerals that you see on television. Always funerals. We want to see something other than funerals. No, she felt. It was a beautiful letter. It was very well received by him. And she did ask me to say, you know, she would love to see this end. She would love to see it end, and she says it very openly, very proudly, and with great sorrow because so many people have been killed.
Mr. President, last week,
Brian, go ahead, Brian.
Yes, sir. I've got a question for each of you.
Yes.
First of all, Mr. President Zelensky, you look fabulous in that suit.
I said the same thing.
Yeah, you look good.
I said the same thing.
Yeah, looks good on
I
you.
said the one that attacked you last time. See, now he's, I remember
Yeah,
that.
I apologize to you. You look wonderful. No, my first question for you, President Zelensky.
In the same suit. You see, I changed, you are not.
Maybe yours is much better. Real quickly, upon peace, God willing we get peace, are you open to holding an election in your country?
Yes, of course. We are open for election, yes. We have to do safety circumstances, and a little bit we need to work in the parliament, because during the war you can't have elections, but we can do security. We need, maybe, how to say, we need a truth, yes, everywhere, in the battlefield, in the sky, in the sea, yeah, to make possible for people to do democratic, open, legal elections.
So you say
we're ready.
during the war you can't have elections. So let me just say 3.5 years from now, so you mean if we happen to be in a war with somebody, no more elections. Oh, that's good. I wonder what the fake
You like this idea?
Yeah.
No.
Speaking of news, I got a question for you. This sounds insane for me even to ask this, but do you think the American media really doesn't even want a peace deal because they've seen they've been so critical of you every step of the way as you lead the charge for peace?
It's an amazing phenomenon. I said that if in the settlement you got Moscow, St. Petersburg, and thousands of miles around them, they would say, I made a bad deal. The level of hatred and animosity is incredible. Not with all. I mean, we have great people up here. We also have terrible people up there that I think are told what to say. But, you know, in solving all of these wars, they don't even write about it. You know, I saw major wars. I saw wars that have been going on for 31, 35, and 37, and a couple of quicker ones. One that was going to go into a full-blown deal very quickly. You know what the one I'm talking about. It was a big one. But they don't even write about that. No matter what I do, no matter what, and you know, this is not anything to do with you. It's probably to your advantage in a certain way. But no matter what I do, no matter what deal I make, from my standpoint, you'll come out good. Maybe President Putin will come out good. But they'll say, Trump was absolutely horrible. It's just that, and I've lived with that for a long time. I've lived with it since just before the first election. I used to get great publicity. Now I get the worst publicity anyone's ever gotten in office, but I won in a landslide, so the people understand. They're the only ones that count, ultimately. But I've also had great reporters. I've had journalists that are very good. But it's very sad when you do the right thing. As an example, they said, because of the fact that Vladimir Putin came to American soil, this was a tremendous defeat for Donald Trump. No, it was really wonderful that he did it. It was a hard thing for him to do, to be honest with you. It was the opposite of what they said, but they said it. Now, if he didn't come, they'd say that was also bad for Trump. You know, there's no way. And there's just a great dishonesty of the press, and I think that's why it's lost its credibility. You know, its credibility is at an all-time low. We have a thing going on right now in D.C. We went from the most unsafe place anywhere to a place that now friends are calling me up, Democrats are calling me up, and they're saying, sir, I want to thank you. My wife and I went out to dinner last night for the first time in 4 years, and Washington, D.C. is safe, and you did that in 4 days. I'll tell you, it's safe. I had another friend of mine. He has a son who's a great golfer. He's on tour, and he came in 4th yesterday in the big tournament where Scotty Scheffler made the great shot, and he said his son is going to dinner in Washington, D.C. tonight. I said, would you have allowed that to happen a year ago? He said, no way, no way. He said, what you've done is incredible. And I think the people realize it. But the press says, he's a dictator, he's trying to take over. No, all I want is security for our people. But people that haven't gone out to dinner in Washington, D.C. in 2 years, are going out to dinner, and the restaurants the last 2 days were busier than they've been in a long time. Thank
Sir,
you.
I walked around yesterday with MTG. If you can walk around with DC with MTG and not be attacked, the city is safe.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Last week, you warned of what you called severe consequences if a 30-day ceasefire or any type of ceasefire were not agreed to by Russia. Will there be severe consequences? Does that change because of
I
your
don't
meeting
think
with
you need a
President Putin?
ceasefire. You know, if you look at the 6 deals that I settled this year, they were all at war. I didn't do any ceasefires. And I know that it might be good to have, but I can also understand strategically why, well, you know, one country or the other wouldn't want it. You have a ceasefire and they rebuild and rebuild and rebuild, and, you know, maybe they don't want that. But if you look at the 6 deals that we made peace and you know, long-term, long-running wars, I didn't do any ceasefires. Would I like the concept, you know, I like the concept of a ceasefire for one reason, because you'd stop killing people immediately, as opposed to in 2 weeks or 1 week or whatever it takes. But we can work a deal where we're working on a peace deal while they're fighting. They have to fight. I wish they could stop. I'd like them to stop. But strategically, that could be a disadvantage for one side or the other. But all of these deals I made without even the mention of the words ceasefire.
Can you explain the decision to offer Ukraine Article 5-like security guarantees, but stop short of pushing for their full membership?
Yeah, well, we haven't done anything on that yet. If you look back and you go back long before President Putin, it was always a statement that they would never allow Ukraine into NATO. So that was a statement that was made, but we haven't discussed any of that yet. We're going to be discussing it today. But we will give them very good protection, very good security. That's part of it. And the people that are waiting for us, they are, I think they're very like-minded. They want to help out all.
Thank you, President. Thank you, President Trump.
Are you disappointed there's no
The
ceasefire, Mr. President?
The United States has already given hundreds of billions of dollars to this war effort in Ukraine. At best, it is a stalemate, and the killing continues. So, President Trump, how much more is the United States willing to give Ukraine? And President Zelensky, how much more do you want?
Well, I'll start off just by saying we're not giving anything now. We're selling weapons. This is something before, I guess the number is well over $300 billion. That was under Joe Biden, a corrupt politician, not a smart man, never was. By the way, go back 40 years, he was not a smart man 40 years ago either, but now he's in particular bad. This was done by a corrupt administration that shouldn't have been in, and frankly, if the right results of the election were given, if I were president, this war would have never taken place, and he would have been very happy, because he would have liked to have seen. I mean, they went through hell. He went through hell. This war would have never happened, and the people that were killed, a couple of million people, a lot of people with soldiers and everything else, and the people that have been displaced and forced into other areas and other countries because of what's happened, none of that would have happened. And I'm just saying that he was a horrible president, whether it was the borders or this. He was just a horrible, corrupt president.
Mr. President,
I can. Thank you so much. So first of all, we have possibility now to buy weapon from the United States. We are thankful for this program and this opportunity. We are thankful for Europe. They pay for this. And through NATO program, for example, Pearl and etc., we have some programs where we can have some money to finance this. And this is a part, I think, it's not a part for the war and to defend us. It also will be a part for security guarantees, to strengthen our army, to rearm Ukrainian army. This is very, very important. And it depends how much money we need to rearm. For example, the question of air defense, we spoke about it with President Trump, and I'm happy that we have now bilateral decisions and we work on it with production, American production. Nobody in Europe has so many air defense like Patriots, for example. We need it very much, and this is also about defending.
I think the good news, we make the best military equipment in the world by far. You mentioned the Patriots. How good are they?
Systems.
We have systems. They're literally 100% foolproof, and it's really like shooting 2 bullets you know, two bullets hitting each other in the air in a space like this. The chance is 100%. It's 99 to 100%. So we sell the equipment to NATO, and NATO does what, I don't know what the arrangement is that you have with, but I know that they want you to have the equipment. And we're getting the best equipment in the world, but they pay us for the equipment. Under Biden, it was just crazy what was going on. I believe the number is over 300. I think it could be $350 billion worth of equipment and money and everything else. And we've made more progress in settling this war in the last 2 months than they made in 4 years. This should have been settled a long time ago, but it should have never happened. Yeah, please.
Real quickly, you pushed out on social media.
All right, Brian, go first.
You pushed out on social media about doing away with mail-in ballots and potentially electronic voting machines. Can you expand on that and how important
Well,
that is?
that's a very off-topic, just really quickly. Mail-in ballots are corrupt. Mail-in ballots, you can never have a real democracy with mail-in ballots. And we, as a Republican Party, are going to do everything possible that we get rid of mail-in ballots. We're going to start with an executive order that's being written right now by the best lawyers in the country to end mail-in ballots because they're corrupt. And you know that we're the only country in the world, I believe, I may be wrong, but just about the only country in the world that uses them because of what's happened. Massive fraud all over the place. The other thing we want changed are the machines. For all of the money they spend, it's approximately 10 times more expensive than paper ballots. And paper ballots are very sophisticated with the watermark paper and everything else. We would get secure elections. We'd get much faster results. The machines, I mean, they say we're going to have the results in 2 weeks. With paper ballots, you have the results that night. Most people, but most people, many countries use paper ballots. It's the most secure form. So between paper ballots, very, very important, paper ballots, and I think maybe even more important, the mail-in voting. We're going to end mail-in voting. It's a fraud. If you have mail-in vote, even Jimmy Carter with this commission, they set it up. He said the one thing about mail-in voting, you will never have an honest election if you have mail-in. And it's time that the Republicans get tough and stop it because the Democrats want it. It's the only way they can get elected. Because with men and women's sports and with transgender for everybody and open borders and all of the horrible things, and now the new thing is they love crime. They're fighting me on the fact that I've made Washington, D.C. safe. We're not going to get mugged, beaten up, or killed like all the people you've been watching get so badly hurt. I'm glad, I hate to take your time in this, but I'm glad you asked me that question.
Sorry.
We're going to stop mail-in ballots because it's corrupt. You know, when you go to a voting booth and you do it the right way and you go to a state that runs it properly, you go in, they even ask me, they asked me for my license plate, for identity. I said, I don't know if I have it. They said, sir, you have to have it. I was very impressed, actually. But it's very hard to cheat with mail-in voting. As you know what happens in California, it's so corrupt, where some people get 5, 6, 7 ballots delivered to them. Now, we got to stop mail-in voting, and the Republicans have to lead the charge. The Democrats want it because they have horrible policy. If you have mail-in voting, you're not going to have many Democrats get elected. That's bigger than anything having to do with redistricting, believe me. And the Republicans have to get smart. We're not going to have a country. I said for a long time at rallies, you need borders and you need free and fair elections. Those two things, otherwise you don't have. We have strong borders now. In 90 days, Mr. President, we didn't have 1, 0, 0, and 3 months. Not one person came in illegally into our country. In fact, even I find that hard to believe, but it's run by a little bit of a liberal group that put out the numbers, so I guess it's, but 0, 0, and 0. You go back a year ago, 2 years ago, 3, millions of people poured into our country. It was terrible. Thank you very much.
From President Trump to be able to make a deal? Is it American troops, intelligence, equipment? What is it?
Everything. And really, it includes 2 parts. First, strong Ukrainian army. That's what I began to discuss with your colleagues. And it's a lot about weapon and people and training missions and intelligence. And second, we will discuss with our partners. It depends on the big countries, on the United States, on a lot of our friends.
And Mr. President, are you willing to commit American troops to that NATO-like protection in order to get President Zelensky to a deal today?
Well, I don't know if you define it that way, but NATO-like, I mean, we have people waiting in another room right now. They're all here from Europe, biggest people in Europe, and they want to give protection. They feel very strongly about it, and we'll help them out with that. I think it's very important. I think it's very important to get the deal done.
You've been involved with the peacekeeping in Ukraine since your first day in the administration. What would you say to the Ukrainian people right now who are suffering under the Russian attacks and hoping that the American people will stand with them?
Well, I know Ukrainian people. I've known many over the years. They're great people. They're smart. They're energetic. They love their country. I mean, they love their country, and we want to get this war ended. That's all I can do. I love the Ukrainian people, but I love all people. I love the Russian people. I love them all. I want to get the war stopped. Very important.
Mr. President, was there any aspect of your discussion with Vladimir Putin that left you disappointed?
Look, we just spoke to, I was just telling the president, I just spoke to President Putin indirectly, and we're going to have a phone call right after these meetings today. And we may or may not have a trilat. If we don't have a trilat, then the fighting continues. And if we do, we have a good chance. I think if we have a trilat, there's a good chance of maybe ending it. But he's expecting my call when we're finished with this meeting. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, press. Thank you. Keep moving.
President Trump there calling an end to the reporters' questions inside the Oval Office with President Zelensky, and you can see the cabinet officials sitting to the president's left there, Mr. Zelensky's team with him as well, all in the Oval Office as they now go behind closed doors without the media there to discuss an end to the Russia-Ukraine war. It's our live coverage here on C-SPAN this afternoon, and we want all of you to be part of it as well. Let's get your reaction to what you just heard in the Oval Office from President Trump and President Zelensky. Republicans dial in at 202-748-8920. Democrats 202-748-8921. And all others, your line 202-748-8922. You can text if you don't want to call at 202-748-8903. Just include your first name, city, and state. Brad Bowman, who is with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, has been with us this afternoon as well. Brad Bowman, I want to begin with what CNN is highlighting here from this meeting, and that is that the president did not rule out defending Ukraine. That was the banner headline that they had up there at the end of that meeting. He said it was the 7 leaders, the European leaders that are at the White House right now, would be involved in any security guarantees for Ukraine because they're the first line of defense. But then he said we would be involved as well.
I agree. That is one of the more significant top 2 or 3 takeaways from this historic Oval Office discussion that we've just witnessed that went, from my perspective, much better than the last one. Yeah, I would say the big takeaway is that you have President Trump, with everything he's has said in the past, contemplating the idea of the United States adding its political heft and military muscle behind a peace agreement and helping to ensure that there aren't subsequent Russian attacks on what remains of Ukraine alongside our European allies. That's a big deal. That's a very big deal that he would contemplate that and not rule that out. And very significant. There was also one other quote that he said later on in the discussion, where he said, if I got the quote right, and folks can check me on this, quote, I don't think you need a ceasefire, end quote, but it might be good to have one. He followed up quickly thereafter. That obviously would be, for supporters of Ukraine, one of the more disappointing things that was said, because really what Ukraine wants, what our European allies want, and what I think is in the American national security interest is an immediate, full, unconditional ceasefire. So the president said that, and then he kind of said, well, it would be nice if we could get one. So I think that might get some headlines that he said that, but it's important